The door to my childhood home burst open with a force that echoed through the halls like a gunshot. There I was, Levi Thompson, 28 years old, and supposedly the pride of the family, locked in a kiss with Alexander Hayes, the man who had turned my world upside down in ways I never anticipated. My father's face drained of color, then flushed with fury as he dropped the grocery bags, apples rolling across the floor. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, his voice cracking with betrayal. In that single moment, everything I had worked for, the family business, the legacy, the approval I'd chased my entire life, slipped through my fingers. I pulled away from Alexander, my heart pounding, knowing that this one act of honesty would shatter the illusion I'd maintained for years. Alexander's hand stayed on my arm, steady even as the room spun. He was 30, a freelance photographer with an easy smile and eyes that saw straight through every wall I'd built. We had met 6 months earlier at a gallery opening in downtown Chicago where I had escaped for a weekend from my corporate marketing job in New York. He had been shooting the event, camera slung over his shoulder, laughing with the curator about light and shadow. I had wandered over, pretending to admire a black and white portrait, but really I was drawn to the calm confidence he carried like it cost him nothing. We talked for hours that night, about city life, about dreams that didn't fit the molds our parents had poured us into. He told me he had come out to his own family at 19 and never looked back. I laughed it off, said I admired that kind of courage, but inside my chest tightened because I had never said those words out loud to anyone. The next morning we grabbed coffee, then lunch, then dinner. By the end of the weekend, I was texting him good night from the airport, already counting the days until I could see him again. Back in New York, the texts turned into late-night calls, then weekend visits. Alexander would fly in, or I would drive out, always careful to keep everything hidden from my family back home. My father ran Thompson Construction, a company built by my grandfather in the 1970s. My mother hosted church potlucks and still set a place for my future wife at every holiday table. My older brother, Ryan, had married his high school sweetheart and already given them 2 grandchildren. I was the last piece of the perfect picture, and I had spent 28 years coloring inside those lines. But Alexander made the lines feel like chains. When he kissed me for the first time on a rooftop in Brooklyn, the city lights glittering below us, something inside me cracked open. For the first time, I wasn't pretending. I was alive. We kept our relationship quiet. No social media, no public dates in Chicago. I told myself it was temporary, that I would figure out how to tell my family when the time was right. I didn't know the time would be forced on me by my own father walking in on the worst possible moment. Now the apples kept rolling and my father's voice filled the kitchen. "Levi, answer me." Alexander stepped forward, calm as ever. "Sir, I love your son." The words hung in the air like smoke. My mother appeared in the doorway, hand over her mouth. My sister Emily peeked from the stairs, eyes wide. In the silence that followed, I felt every expectation I had ever carried crash down around me. I had come home for my father's birthday, thinking I could keep the secret one more weekend. Instead, I had lit the match that would burn the whole house down. My father pointed at the door. "Get out. Both of you." His voice was quieter now, but the finality in it cut deeper than any shout. Alexander looked at me, waiting for my choice. I grabbed his hand, the same hand that had steadied me through every doubt, and we walked out into the cold Illinois night. Behind us, the door slammed shut, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. The drive back to the city was silent except for the hum of tires on pavement. Alexander didn't ask questions. He just held my hand tighter. I stared at the highway lights blurring past and wondered how many pieces of myself I had just lost, and how many I had finally found. The first week after the confrontation felt like walking through fog. I stayed at Alexander's small apartment in Wicker Park, sleeping on the couch because I couldn't bring myself to share the bed yet. Every morning, I woke up reaching for my phone, half expecting a text from my mother saying it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, the screen stayed dark. My father had always been the loud one, but my mother's silence hurt more. She had raised me on stories of faith and family duty, and now I had become the cautionary tale. Alexander gave me space, but never distance. He cooked pasta on the tiny stove, played soft jazz while he edited photos, and left little notes on the fridge, simple things like, "You're not alone," or "Coffee's ready." One night he sat beside me on the couch and said, "I know this is bigger than us right now, but I'm here for whatever you need." His voice was steady, the same voice that had talked me through panic attacks when I first realized I couldn't keep lying to myself. I leaned into him then, letting the tears come for the first time since the door slammed. Work became my escape. At the marketing firm in the Loop, I threw myself into campaigns, staying late so I wouldn't have to think. My boss noticed the change and offered me a promotion, more travel, more money. I almost took it just to run farther away. But Alexander's quiet presence pulled me back every evening. We started walking along the lakefront at dusk, the city skyline glowing across the water. He would point out the way light hit the buildings, and I would listen, realizing for the first time that beauty didn't have to be hidden. My sister Emily was the first to break the silence. She called on a Tuesday night while Alexander was in the darkroom developing film. "Levi, Dad's not speaking to anyone. Mom cries in the kitchen when she thinks no one's listening. What are you going to do?" Her voice trembled. I told her the truth. I was in love. She was quiet for a long time. "I always wondered," she finally said. "You never looked at girls the way Ryan did." She promised to talk to our parents, but I heard the doubt in her tone. Family loyalty ran deep in the Thompsons, and I had broken the code. The misunderstanding came 2 weeks later. Alexander saw a photo on my phone, an old picture of me and a girl named Sarah from my college days. My mother had texted it that morning with a message. "She's still single and asking about you." I had deleted the text but forgotten to delete the photo. Alexander's face went still when he saw it. "Is this what you really want? A life you can show your family?" His voice cracked for the first time since the confrontation. I tried to explain, but the words tangled. He grabbed his camera bag and left for a shoot, leaving me alone with the fear that I had already lost him too. That night, I drove to his favorite coffee shop and waited on the curb until he finished work. When he walked out, I stood up and said the words I had practiced in the mirror for weeks. "You are the only future I want." Sarah was never real. "You are." He studied my face for a long moment, then pulled me into a hug right there on the sidewalk. Passers-by glanced, but nobody stared. In Chicago's queer neighborhood, it felt almost normal. For the first time, I didn't flinch. We walked home holding hands openly, the city lights reflecting in puddles like scattered stars. Alexander told me stories about his own coming out, how his mother had hugged him and his father had needed time, but eventually came around. "It doesn't happen overnight," he said. "But it can happen." I wanted to believe him. That night we finally shared the bed, not out of passion, but out of quiet certainty. His heartbeat against my back was the only promise I needed. Yet the pressure kept building. My boss called me into his office and mentioned a client who was the son of a major donor to my father's church. "They're conservative," he warned. "Keep things professional." I nodded, but inside I felt the walls closing in again. Alexander noticed the tension and suggested we take a weekend trip to the Indiana Dunes. Just the two of us. No phones, no expectations. I agreed, desperate for air. On the drive there, I told him about the family business meetings my father used to drag me to, how I had learned to smile and shake hands while hiding who I was. Alexander listened without interrupting, then said softly, "You don't have to carry that alone anymore." The dunes stretched out in front of us, golden and endless. We walked the beach barefoot, the lake wind whipping our hair. For a few hours the world felt wide open. I kissed him under the setting sun, tasting salt and freedom, and for the first time I believed maybe we could build something real. But freedom always comes with a price. When we returned Sunday night, my phone lit up with missed calls from Ryan. I listened to the voicemail once, twice, 3 times. "Dad's had a heart scare. The doctor says stress. You need to come home and fix this, Levi. Fix it before it's too late." The words landed like stones in my stomach. Alexander saw my face and didn't ask questions. He simply packed an overnight bag for me and drove me to the train station. As the train pulled away, I watched him standing on the platform, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. I pressed my forehead to the cold window and wondered how much more I would have to sacrifice before the universe decided I had paid enough. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and regret. My father lay in the cardiac unit, monitors beeping steadily, his face pale against the white sheets. My mother sat beside him, knitting needles clicking like tiny accusations. Ryan stood by the window, arms crossed, refusing to meet my eyes. Emily had texted me the room number, but stayed home with the kids. I hovered in the doorway, Alexander's last hug still warm on my skin. Levi. My mother's voice was thin. She didn't stand up. My father opened his eyes, and the disappointment in them hit harder than any machine alarm. You came. It wasn't a welcome. I pulled up a chair and tried to explain about Alexander, about love that didn't fit the picture they had painted. My father turned his face away. I built this family on values. You chose to tear it down. The words stung because part of me still believed him. Ryan waited until our parents were asleep before cornering me in the hallway. You're killing him, you know that? Mom hasn't slept in days. The church is whispering. Clients are pulling contracts. All because you couldn't keep it in your pants. His voice rose until a nurse shushed us. I wanted to shout back that love wasn't something I could keep in my pants, but the fight drained out of me. Instead, I whispered, I'm sorry you're hurting, but I'm not sorry for loving him. Ryan's laugh was bitter. You always were selfish. I left the hospital at midnight and drove to the only place that still felt safe, Alexander's apartment. He opened the door before I could knock, pulled me inside, and held me while I shook. We didn't talk much. He made tea, the way his grandmother had taught him, and we sat on the fire escape watching the city lights. They'll come around, he said, but I heard the doubt. That night I told him about the family business offer my father had made me years ago, vice president, if I settled down with a nice girl from the congregation. Alexander's fingers traced circles on my knee. You turned it down even before you met me? I nodded. I turned it down because it felt like a cage. The next morning my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a private group chat from my old high school friends. Someone had posted a blurry photo of Alexander and me at the dunes, taken from a distance. The caption read, Levi Thompson finally outed himself. Pray for the family. My stomach dropped. I showed Alexander. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Secrets don't stay secret forever. That afternoon I met my sister at a coffee shop near the hospital. Emily looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. Ryan's the one who sent the photo, she confessed. He thought if the church knew, you'd come back to your senses. Betrayal burned in my chest. My own brother. Emily reached across the table. I'm not like him. I want you to be happy. But Mom's talking about cutting you out of the will. Dad's signing papers tomorrow. The words landed like punches. I had expected anger, but disinheritance felt colder. I drove back to Alexander's in a daze. He was editing photos on his laptop, the screen glowing with images of us at the lake. I stood behind him and wrapped my arms around his shoulders. They're taking everything, I whispered. He closed the laptop and turned to face me. Not everything. They can't take me. His kiss was gentle, a promise. But later that night, alone in the bathroom, I stared at my reflection and wondered who I was without the Thompson name. The boy who had played Little League for his father's approval. The teenager who had dated girls to keep the peace. The man who had finally found truth. None of them knew how to survive without the family that had defined them. Alexander found me there and didn't say a word. He simply turned on the shower, pulled me under the warm water, and let me cry until the tears mixed with the steam. When we finally slept, I dreamed of my childhood home, the door wide open, but no one inside. I woke up reaching for him, and he was there, solid, real, the only anchor I had left. The lawyer's office smelled of old leather and fresh ink. My father had summoned me through Ryan, refusing to speak directly. I sat across from Mr. Hargrove, the family attorney I had known since I was 10. He slid a thick envelope across the desk. Your father has removed you from the trust and the company shares. Effective immediately, the words blurred on the page. Alexander waited in the lobby, giving me space. I signed where I was told to sign and walked out feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Outside, Alexander stood up when he saw my face. It's done. I nodded. He took the envelope from my shaking hands and tucked it into his messenger bag like it was nothing. Come on. Let's get ice cream. Terrible decisions deserve sugar. His attempt at normalcy almost made me laugh. We walked to the little shop on Division Street where the owner knew him by name. Over mint chocolate chip, he told me stories about the first time his own father had cut him off, how he had lived on ramen and couch surfed until he sold his first gallery print. You rebuild, he said. Stronger. That weekend, we drove to Milwaukee for a photography exhibit featuring Alexander's work. The gallery was small but packed. People recognized his name now. A local magazine had done a feature on queer artists in the Midwest. I stood in the corner watching him charm buyers, proud and terrified at the same time. A woman in a sharp blazer approached me. "You're Levi, right? Alexander talks about you all the time." Her smile was warm. For the first time, I introduced myself as his partner without hesitation. The word felt right on my tongue. But the relief didn't last. Monday morning, my phone rang. My boss. The conservative client had pulled the entire account after seeing the group chat screenshot. "I'm sorry, Levi. We have to let you go." The call ended before I could argue. I sat on Alexander's couch staring at the wall until he came home from a shoot. He took one look at my face and canceled his evening plans. We ordered Thai food and watched old movies until I fell asleep on his chest. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. My mother texted me a single line. "Your grandmother's ring was supposed to be yours." I gave it to Ryan's wife. The ring had been in the family for 4 generations. I stared at the message until the screen went black. Alexander found me in the kitchen gripping the counter. "She's grieving," he said softly. People do stupid things when they grieve. I wanted to believe him, but the ache felt permanent. That night we fought for the first time. I accused him of not understanding how deep the roots went. He accused me of still caring more about their approval than our future. The words flew sharp and fast until we both ran out of breath. Then he pulled me close and whispered, "I'm not them. I never will be. But I'm not leaving either." We made up on the living room floor, slow and careful, learning each other's edges again. The following week, Alexander surprised me with plane tickets to New York. "You need to see something bigger than Chicago," he said. We stayed in a tiny Airbnb in Brooklyn. The city pulsed with life, rainbow flags in windows, couples holding hands without fear. We walked the High Line at sunset, and I felt something loosen in my chest. On the last night, Alexander took me to a rooftop bar overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "This could be us," he said. "A new start." I looked at him, the city lights dancing in his eyes, and for the first time I believed it. The job offer came from an unlikely place, a small design studio in Brooklyn that had seen Alexander's exhibit online. They needed a marketing director who understood Midwestern brands. The salary was less than half of what I had made, but it was mine. I accepted before I could second guess. Alexander helped me pack the few boxes I still owned. We drove the U-Haul across 3 states with the windows down and music loud. Every mile felt like shedding skin. New York welcomed us with open arms and impossible rent. We found a studio apartment in Queens with a leaky faucet and a view of the subway tracks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Alexander set up his darkroom in the closet, and I turned the kitchen table into a makeshift desk. Mornings we drank coffee on the fire escape, watching the city wake up. Evenings we cooked together, burning garlic and laughing about it. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Then the betrayal deepened. Ryan started a GoFundMe for Dad's medical bills and used my name in the description without permission. The post went viral in conservative circles. Comments poured in, some supportive, most vicious. I read them until Alexander gently closed the laptop. "They don't know you," he said. They never did. I called Ryan and left a voicemail telling him exactly what I thought of his stunt. He never called back. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. Alexander had a gallery meeting in Manhattan. I stayed home working on a campaign when my mother's number flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was small. "Levi, your father had another episode. The doctors say stress is making it worse. He keeps asking why you haven't come home." I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. "Mom, I can't come home if home doesn't want me." She was quiet for so long I thought she had hung up. Then she whispered, "I miss my son." The line went dead. I sat on the floor and cried until Alexander came home soaked from the rain. He didn't ask questions. He just wrapped me in a towel and held me. That night we talked until sunrise, about sacrifice, about what family really meant. He told me about the boyfriend he had lost at 22 because the guy's parents had threatened to cut him off financially. "I learned the hard way that you can't save everyone," he said. "Sometimes you have to save yourself." The next morning I booked a flight to Chicago alone. Alexander offered to come, but I needed to face them by myself. At the hospital, my father looked smaller, tubes everywhere. My mother hugged me tight enough to bruise. Ryan stood in the corner, arms crossed. I told them everything. How Alexander had saved me from a life of pretending. How love wasn't a choice, but a truth. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "I don't understand it. But I don't want to lose you either." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. I flew back to New York lighter. Alexander met me at the airport with flowers, sunflowers, my favorite. We took the train home holding hands the whole way. That night we danced in our tiny kitchen to an old song on the radio. For the first time, the future felt possible. 6 months later, the leaves in Central Park turned gold. Alexander and I walked the same paths where we had taken our first New York photos together. His latest exhibit had opened to glowing reviews. My studio had promoted me to senior designer. We had even managed a quiet Thanksgiving with my mother and Emily. My father stayed home, but sent a card that simply read, "Thinking of you." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One crisp evening, Alexander stopped under the bow bridge and pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver band. "Not marriage yet," he said, "but a promise that whatever comes next, we face it together." I slid the ring on and kissed him right there, tourists smiling as they passed. The city lights reflected in the water like 1,000 tiny approvals. Looking back, the journey had cost me the family I was born into, but it had given me the family I chose. I had learned that love isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to walk through it anyway. Alexander had taught me that truth always finds the light, even when the door slams shut behind you. We walked home arm in arm, the future stretching out in front of us brighter than any Chicago skyline. True or false, sacrificing family approval for authentic love is always the right choice in the end?